today, I think we have is it the first British person we've had?
Oh, man, I don't know. But he is British.
He is British. He's got a great accent.
He's got a great...
There's more to him than his accent, but I feel like we both really leaned into it because every American wants a British accent.
So today we have James from Winging It podcast on our show, and we're just so thankful that he said, yeah, I want to talk to you guys.
He made time out of his busy schedule and his own podcasting to come on our podcast. And James is somebody we met a few months back and instantly hit it off with. He's a super interesting guy, has traveled all over the world extensively. He's someone like us who just particularly loves traveling by land. So when he gets a chance, he loves crossing land borders, driving, overlanding. So we have fun talking to him in this episode about, getting held up at fake borders and messing up border crossings in Asia and all of these interesting things. He's just a really fascinating guy, has great travel stories, and then he's going to share some of those with us today.
Yeah, and if you've ever wanted to know what it takes to start a podcast, he also dives into that too. But before we get into the interview, I'm Chris.
I'm Sara.
And this is What No One Tells You. And if you're new here, I would just say, give this a chance, because not only do we have a cool English guy on, but I think we're cool people as well. We travel quite a bit, and we love bringing on people who love to travel and love to talk about this whole business, if you want to call it that. And we just love these experiences. So leave a review on Spotify or iTunes or maybe even YouTube. But with that said, let's just dive in.
Let's go.
James, thanks for being here, man. I mean, you are no stranger to podcasts, but not only do you do podcasts and you're in the travel world, and we met you at TravelCon just a few months ago, but you also have a really cool accent, especially to our American audience. You sound very elevated and, intelligent. So could you just tell us who you are, what you do, where you're from, your whole life's ambitions, all of that stuff?
Well, that's why I get the US listeners on my podcast, right? Because they probably just want to listen to the accent. The quality is not great, but the accent's okay. No, I'm from Norwich in England. So if you're looking at a map right now on Google, that's east. So if you're familiar with London, which I'm sure most people are, you would need to get to Liverpool Street Station and get the train up. So it's about 2 hours east, not into the water, but like sort of northeast on the coast.
Okay, I was wondering.
If you want some facts about Norwich, where I'm from,
yeah.
It used to be the second biggest city in UK until the Industrial Revolution.
Oh.
Its cathedral is 1,000 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And I've done an episode on that actually on my YouTube, walking around Norwich. So very historic, lots of Roman ruins, lots of even older stuff there. Like the oldest pub is from, I think it's like 1250 AD, and you can still go in it. It's got one of those like weird roofs where it's like angled, right? Because back in the day, it's obviously probably quite straight, but over the years, over 800 years, it's kind of gone sloping down. So that's a cool place to hang out if you want to drink. And it's kind of known for being a bit farmery, a bit ancestral and quiet and sleepy, probably.
I love that. Love that.
It's so funny to hear you talk about age and when things were founded or whatever, because I mean here in the States, in Canada too, of course, but it's like, oh, hey, this pub or this bar has been open for 50 years. Isn't that an accomplishment? Or, or whatever. And you're like, no, this
Isn't
one.
that cute?
Yeah, that's so cute. That's crazy to me. Yeah.
We've never been to England. I've been to Scotland, but I've never been to England.
Oh,
it is
wow.
high on our list.
Yeah, it is.
I think maybe Christmas. Would that be worth going to for Christmas?
If you're there at Christmas, let me know and I'll see you there.
Okay.
I'm going back for Christmas. Yeah.
Okay. It just seems like such a magical place at Christmas time. That could be a whole nother episode talking about Christmas in London. Okay, I've already derailed the conversation. Keep going. I'm really bad about that.
No, I think I derailed it. I think, and the life story is I grew up there. I went to school, not interested in school really, was much more musical based. So managed to get into music college in London through an audition and studied music for 4 years. And then halfway through that, got bored. And wanted to go and travel, which we'll come to, I think, is one of the questions later, and I'll tell you why. And then after that, that's 2013, I kind of left and kind of been on the road since. So off and on for 12 years. Yeah, 11, 12 years, right? So that's the rough backstory. And then I kind of settled here in Canada as we go into our 30s, right? Probably because of COVID. If I'm honest. Maybe not out of pure love for Canada, but COVID forced us to stay, and we got the residency, and we're now getting the passport. So that's where we are now.
Wow.
We get that.
Yeah.
We
yeah.
made one of those COVID moves too.
Yeah.
But Vancouver's a cool place. We do like
It is.
Vancouver. That's
Yeah.
a really cool place.
That's
to
where
just
I'm now,
happen
yeah.
to land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2013, you started traveling, and then is that when you started the podcast as well?
No, 2021 during
Okay.
COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't really switched on back in those days. You know, we're the same age, right, roughly. So if you think back to 2012, 2013, if you're doing some travels, you think, oh, why didn't I start YouTube? Why didn't I start podcasting? It was like the early days, the infancy, right? Just wasn't switched on. And there's a few people that you probably interviewed on your podcast that were the early pioneers of content creation for travel, and they're well in the door, right? So no, podcast started later, and I traveled 8 years before I started talking about it, really.
Yeah.
But that shows that you loved it without having to make it your job. Like you got to do it and chase it without making it, more than just a hobby.
Yeah.
I think that's respectable.
No, it is respectable.
I like that. No,
It's funny.
I really because I feel like some people get into it and they're like, oh, it's my job now. I have to continue it.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you can see like the passion kind of dies, but
Well-
like it was there.
Well, and it's funny because I just got a haircut, and
Same.
the girl that was cutting my hair, I was telling her that we used to do van life, and she's like, "Did you do van life before it was cool?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we did. Like there wasn't a lot of people out there doing van life when we were doing it or started out." And she said, she's like, I see so many people starting to like jump into that niche. Like they'll see other people do it, and so they think that they can get popular or successful because of somebody else's passion, right? And so, but at least with you and your traveling, like at least you know you love it, and like you're not just jumping into travel because you think you can make money from it, right?
Yeah, and also I'm glad I've got the experiences in. Imagine if you're our age now, and you generally might love travel right now, but you haven't done much. There's a lot of pressure there to get a move on, because as you approach mid-30s to late 30s, you get more tired. You're much more mature in life. So I think that maybe the funny stuff or the edgy stuff doesn't happen as much, and that you could force that issue, right? Where a lot of the stories I've had from early 20s traveling are like just situations you end up in. They weren't like forced or I was trying to get content. It just happened, right? So I feel like there's a lot of pressure later on. It's better late than never. Don't get me wrong. If you go and travel now, great, but don't like go and create content because you want to make money. Like if you're traveling to make money, like what's the point? Like, I'd understand. Just do something that you want to do. Like if you're interested in travel, just go and be passionate about it. Don't do it for the sake of it, I think.
I mean, we kind of talk about this a lot about like when your hobby becomes your job and then you feel a lot of pressure on it. But travel's always been fun for us too. It's just what we love. So don't ever want to lose that.
So like in your travels, how many countries have you been to?
What's the country?
Yeah.
Places, probably like 75 maybe.
Wow.
Countries,
You've
maybe
been
70.
everywhere.
Depends how you define a country, right? So
Okay. Yeah.
around that. I don't really. That's something I used to do, but I don't count them anymore because I think that's a bit more towards a competition of travel, right? So I'm not really that way inclined anymore. But I think around 70, 75 in that ballpark.
I like that.
Yeah.
We touched on that like in one of our very first podcast episodes. We had a girl on and we were talking about how we didn't like the idea of country counting because it turned it into like a numbers game versus like a travel for the love of it kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. We haven't talked about that in a long time.
No, we haven't.
But I always ask that question, like how many countries have you been to? Because it is a good gauge, but like just give me a ballpark estimate.
Yeah. So
Either
like
way, it's been a lot.
if you were to look at that list of places that you've been, whether it's territories or, or whatever, what's the one place that like left you shocked or kind of like that made you feel like traveling for the first time, if that makes sense? You know how like you go somewhere and you're like, wow, I can't believe I'm able to do this. Like what place, like if you were to go right instantly, like what place made you feel that way?
I talked about this the other day on a podcast of my own with a guest, and we had some interesting questions about it. But I said Bangkok because up to 2013, I had travelled a little bit. Europe. If you're from Europe, you kind of just go to the countries in Europe because cheap flights, right? Or they were anyway.
Right.
And so I've been to like Germany and Belgium and probably school trips in Italy as well. And I went to Australia. And Australia didn't really hit me in terms of the culture shock, more of like, oh wow, there's somewhere better than England that you can live in. I need to go back there. So I parked that for a bit. But interestingly on that trip, my friend who I went with from university, another musician, he said, I really want to go to Asia first. But I had no inclination to go to Asia. I didn't really know what was there, given how big it is, right? And he said, I want to go Southeast Asia for 3 months. Do you fancy it? I was like, yeah, why not? I'll join. So when I had no idea, and I booked the flight, and I landed in Bangkok, that first 2 or 3 days was just mental. The noise, the sound, the way that people try and scam you. This is before smartphones as well, so you can't just go on Google. You're trying to navigate taxis, rickshaws, tuk-tuks, boats. You're trying to go to local places and try and find them without a map. This is the real hardcore culture shock traveling, and I think that was probably that week. Was the start of the week was pretty tough, but by the end of the week I was loving it, and I was loving the challenge and trying to find new places and new people to hang out with. So that was probably the place, not specifically Thailand, but Bangkok, I think.
Bangkok, man, there's so much happening in that city. Love it.
There is.
Crazy.
I don't know. We don't know Bangkok as well as we should.
No, we spent a lot of time in Chiang Mai, and we only spent one night in Bangkok.
A couple nights.
Well, and
I was sick as a dog.
Yeah, but
so my memory's not great of Bangkok.
And the only other thing I remember is somebody getting hit by a car, and they got up and they started kicking the other car. It was all out fight in the street.
It was a guy on a motorbike just got hit right in front of us.
Yeah.
And he just. So that was Bangkok to us.
Yeah.
Sickness and that. But we really did like it. I mean, I think Asia is probably one of those places for us. We just absolutely love all the places we've been in Asia, which isn't that many, but it's just so vibrant, and you're right, culture shock. I mean, especially coming from a Western country, it's just so colorful, and it's so the smells are different and the noises are different. And it's just we love Asia. I think it's incredible.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of our friends don't necessarily have that passion or interest to go to Asia the way we did.
Wow.
And I want to change people's mind in that because it's so fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, we were doing, we were in Iceland with a group of people, and we were leading a good group and all this. And we're hey, we're thinking about going to Korea after this. What do you guys think? And 9, out of the 12 people, I think it was 10 of them were I have no interest in that whatsoever. Yeah. And it bummed me out so much because we love the Asian culture and love being Southeast Asia. We still haven't been to Japan, but Thailand and Korea have both have made lasting impressions on us.
I mean, Korea is easy travel. I mean, you go to Korea, the trains are bullet trains, people speak English, the signs are English. It really is a nice little dip into Asia, right? I can't believe someone would say not interested. I mean, if you say somewhere like Myanmar or Laos, then or Bangladesh, you're going to be. It's going to be different to Thailand, right? But I can't believe someone wouldn't go to Korea. That's crazy.
I know. Well, we say the same thing. It's a really great first step into Asia because you're right. So much of it's in English, especially for Americans. It's a really easy place because you can see a lot of that American influence post-war kind of thing. So it doesn't feel crazy for them, but yet it's foreign enough to where you can get lost. I think it's a great place. We could talk about Asia all day. I'm already railing it again. Chris is always having to rein me in on these episodes. Go ahead, lead it.
Well, all right. We've talked about a little bit of travel, but I kind of want to. There's a couple different things we want to talk to you about. One being you decided. I mean, you're doing YouTube, but you really podcasting has been kind of your thing right now, and about travel podcasting. What was it about podcasting that made you why did you start doing it? Why did you think it was a good thing to get into, especially with the travel niche?
Yeah, because the question is, why didn't I start YouTube 3 years ago? I think the question, or the answer to that question would be that I knew I had lots of people I met over the 10 years traveling. And I knew we could share some funny stories and some good stories about how to travel and the tips and tricks and different countries. And I thought, well, in COVID, we can't travel. So what's the next best thing? I was pretty down on COVID, right? I don't know what you guys were thinking. Some people loved COVID because it was a refresh, a restart. They could be at home and justify it. For me, it was a bit of a nightmare. So for me, I was what can I do to navigate that? And that was a podcast. So there's no thought process in this. It's called winging it, and I winged it. I bought a microphone, a USB microphone, sat down on my phone, which was not the iPhone I got now, and I pressed record. And I pretty much got some guests that were my friends, right? So the first 6 months were people I've met traveling. Really, really funny episodes. If you go back now and listen, probably a bit more raw, no editing. The audio quality is not the best, but it's definitely just raw stories, quite as raw as it gets in terms of podcasting, not as refined as what I do now, maybe. So, just sort of get people along, try and recall some funny stories, try and get that nostalgia back, and get me thinking about when we could travel again. Because at the time, we didn't know when or how long this is going to last for, right? So we didn't know when we could travel. Yeah. So I thought, okay, let's talk about it. Let's get through to 2022 or end of 2021 2022. Let's reassess. And I didn't really take it seriously, the podcast, and probably until that year, right? So, yeah, just a bit of fun, really. No thoughts about making money. I mean, none of those sort of thoughts. Just a genuine interest for chatting with people like yourselves and learning from you, but also having the fun, having a bit of a laugh.
Love that.
That's the reason.
I love that way of finding a little bit of escapism in the middle of COVID. I think we're like that, where we needed that because we were going stir crazy. I think the traveling people, we all were just losing it.
We're losing our minds. And So, go ahead.
No, I was just going to draw attention to, you just passed a major mile mark with your podcast. Can you share that with us?
Oh, yeah. I accidentally realised the other day that I passed 250 episodes.
That's incredible.
And
That's
I've got
incredible.
The 150th guest coming as we speak today on next one, the Monday, so the 23rd of July, whatever the Monday is. Yeah.
Wow.
So
congratulations. That's amazing.
That is incredible. Like, for those of you who aren't podcasters or not creating content, I mean, 200 episodes, 250 episodes are like, that's a freaking ton of content. It's a lot of time.
Content, dedication,
a lot of free content.
consistency.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We aspire to be that consistent with everything in life.
A lot of consistent.
There's a few caveats in there though, right? Because I took my podcast with me traveling last year. So my idea, I had a few phases in the podcast. I thought the first 6-8 months, just get my feet in the door, talk to some people, try and get some guests that maybe I don't know. That's a struggle. And I nearly quit because no one was really listening in July 2021. So I thought, okay, well, I'll keep going. And then I got to the end of the year, and somewhere, I don't know why, I still don't know why, the stats just jumped. So I thought, oh, there are more people listening. Whether that's a correction, whether that's real life, I'm not sure. So I thought, okay. And then people started reaching out to come on the podcast. So 2022 was the year of guests. I was like, right, I'll do a weekly guest. And I knew sometime that year that we were going to go traveling. So going into 2023, we quit our jobs and went traveling for a year. And I knew that I'd take the podcast with me and try and do it at the same time, which is really tough. I'm sure you guys are aware.
Oh, yeah.
So like, there's loads of like 2-3 episodes a week about where I was in the world, just like real raw 10 minutes. Like, this is what I've seen, this is what I've done, this is what I've learned from this place. So there's 100 episodes in there that are solo episodes, but more like travel based in terms of being on the road. And then we're here in 2024, and it's kind of a mix. So yeah, that's where we're at.
That's crazy.
I love the natural progression of it, though.
Yeah. So you took a whole year off to travel?
Yeah, 20 odd countries, way too fast.
Wow.
20 countries in a year seems
and a road
like
trip in there as well, which you guys have been doing, right? So yeah, that road trip across Canada and US, that's part of it, which actually made it even more difficult because we'll come on to it, but logistically quite hard.
So you were doing the podcast while you were doing the cross Canada road trip, because we talked about that in person a couple months ago. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Wait,
we know how hard that is.
Hang on.
And you guys were in a van, if I'm not mistaken.
Wait,
like, we know what
were in a
that's
van?
like. Yeah.
They were in a van.
Yes.
Okay.
I know this.
A van.
So, I mean, like, we have our truck and we have electrical plugs, and like, we're able to like do everything in the truck. It's like a moving studio. Like, we've made it that way. But did yours, like your van, you were able to plug up and do, like, logistically just have everything there? Or like, what did that look like? Or were you in a McDonald's doing the podcast, like trying to...
No shame, we've done it.
Well, this is still our camper van. This is a Toyota Sienna. So it's like a people carrier. So you can't stand up in it. Not possible. You can barely sit up on the bed. And it was gutted out from the back, so we could maybe chill out in there if it's raining on the bed, but you're kind of laying down, right? So it's not like a sofa or anything. So we had one power source, but it's only powering phones if we needed it for a couple of days before we had to recharge that. So no, it was a mix of like, where am I going to be, do you think, in 3 days' time, where I might have electricity, where I can charge phones, charge my laptop, and record and release at the same time. So we kind of knew 3 or 4 days in advance we might be in that city. And because in Canada, it's really hard to camp in cities. And as you go east, we want to check out every city, like Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, Quebec. So we knew we were going to stay in probably like an Airbnb type accommodation there. So that's why I planned to get more content out. So I kind of strategically planned, made my notes, recorded at the right time, released when I could with Wi-Fi. Yeah, that was kind of the basis of that.
Okay. There was
Yeah.
a little bit of strategizing in
Okay,
there.
that's
Yeah.
cool. All right, yeah, I was curious. I mean, especially you're right. Like doing this on the road is sometimes almost next to impossible. Sometimes, especially like internet and just, I mean, even us, like we will, trying to upload a video to YouTube, or a podcast. It's the worst. It's the worst. And we did find though that Walmart has the fastest internet in all of the land, no matter where you're at.
Even in Mexico.
Wow.
Walmart comes through for
Yeah.
us. Starlink has changed the game. It
Starlink,
has.
yeah.
But it can still be slow.
Yeah. So like if we ever have to upload a video on the road, you'll probably find me in the linen section at Walmart. Like I just bring my laptop
so creepy
in.
looking though. He has his laptop and he's sitting on the shelf like it's a standing desk.
It's the
At
worst.
least it's not the kids department, like the toy department or something. He goes somewhere like a little bit less.
I didn't even think about that.
That's so creepy. It seems so romantic in theory to do podcasting from the road. I mean, we definitely had visions of ourselves like doing podcast episodes from Patagonia or outside a volcano or something. And most of the time it's like a truck stop or a McDonald's parking lot or something like that. But you do what you gotta do.
Yeah, I think the solo episodes are fine. You can record offline. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'll be in the van, just like if Emma's out doing something, I just sit there with my microphone. Not the best like acoustics in the van, but hey, I get something out there in terms of locally. And then when I get to the Wi-Fi, like a Walmart, we stayed at Walmart car parks quite a lot. We would upload it. But for YouTube, it's a different game. I can't even imagine what that'd be like, just because of the sheer volume of the weight of the file, right? I don't know how you'd
huge.
even. Yeah. Crikey.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It can be, it can be a lot sometimes.
I love your British words, by the way.
Yeah,
And fancy. I love it.
I know. I was like,
We don't get to talk to too many Brits. This is fun. It's very charming to us.
Do you think that, are you a good listener?
For the podcast or in general?
Well, I mean, in general, has the podcast made you a good listener? Or were you a good listener before and then that's why podcasting was kind of natural for you?
I would say I'm a good listener because I'm not a big contributor in groups. And what I mean by that is like in a work environment, for example, I wouldn't be the one like constantly talking. I'd say what I need to say and I make it a bit more efficient, and what needs to be said. So I feel like I could listen quite well. And podcasting's been interesting with guests. Like you get some guests who know the boundary of or the time limit of their response. So this is what I've learned probably most in podcasts is don't talk forever. Have your little point, like I'm saying right now. I know when I'm going to finish in a minute, so I'll give you guys time to speak. But some people don't know this, right?
Yeah.
So I've had some people who, every guest is brilliant. I'm not like shit on guests here, but like some guests just don't have that nous or ability to stop. Mm-hmm. So you have to go in and sort of interject and get another question in. And that can be quite hard because you've got to break up that conversation some way, right? Yeah. And then there's some guests who are really good at it. Probably like public speakers are pretty good. Like TravelCon, you guys spoke. Amazing. And like other people spoke. You just know how to get a room, how to navigate. It's just a different skill and a really good skill to have. So yeah, I'm pretty good at listening, but I also can trust my instincts when I know when to cut the conversation off or whether to push it more. I had some people who don't speak that much, so more questions, right? So yeah.
It's definitely a skill to learn, podcasting. It still feels very new to us.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel you when, like, you're right. I think the hardest part for me is when the guest will just give like a one-word answer or like a very short answer, and then I'll look at Sara or she'll look at me and we're just like, so how about the weather outside? Like we're just trying to like recover.
Pull anything out of them that you can.
I've got a trick to that. Like, I've got a little rule with that. I've got a two trick thing I have is even if it's one word or a very short worded sentence, is there a word in that sentence that you can maybe riff off, whether they mention something quite interesting? Or secondly, I've got my notes here, like I've already got the next question lined up, so I'm not waiting or giving that awkward silence because I'm trying to get ahead of the game. Mm-hmm. But it is difficult. It really is difficult, especially when you feel like you've got enough notes to go through the episode and you're rattling through them at a serious pace, right? So,
Yes. We've had those guests, but they still have such good stories. We're like, come on, I know you've got it in you. Speak a little more. You're fascinating. Yeah, no, we get that.
Yeah. So do you think, if somebody were listening to this right now and they're like, you know what, maybe podcasting would be for me, because sometimes, people are like, I don't want to do YouTube. I don't want to put my life out there. I don't want to, do all that. I love to travel, but like, is podcasting dead? Like, is it something that's still doable, or do you think, anybody could do it?
I would say podcasting is not dead. I'd say it's the opposite. It's on the upward trajectory. The only thing I'd say is the last year or so, I don't know if you've realised this or you've noticed that so many people got podcasts. I mean, like, even celebrities, everyone's got a podcast now. Like, when we started 2 or 3 years ago, I don't think it was as like busy as that. Not just in travel, just in general. But now, like, if I'd search for someone I know, could be a sports person or whatever, they've got a podcast. Comedians got podcasts. It does seem to be very saturated, but I do think there's still more room for you to be in there. You just got to develop your niche and develop your little audience, and you've got to make people like you, because travel, we can all talk about the same stuff, right? But people follow your YouTube because they love you guys, right? So that's like a thing you've got to really hone in on and try and get into. That's why I do solo episodes, because I do want people to listen to the guests, but I also want people to maybe listen to me about some funny stories or something I can give them, right? So, and weirdly enough, I do get similar stats on both. So they might listen to both sides of the podcast, the long format and short format, but I'm not surprised if some people don't listen to the guests but do listen to the 10-minute episodes, right? So trying to appeal to both of those audiences.
That's really smart. I like how you balance that out. Actually, after seeing how you did that when we talked to you at TravelCon, we kind of reevaluated. We're like, James is onto something. Like, that's keep it like, really, you've done this for a long time and you're really good at it. And just engaging them with your story, but also bringing in other people, and just that balance is really nice.
Yeah, because I think you're absolutely right. Like, that's the problem, is like, we're asking the questions, but you're not really getting, our audience isn't getting to know us as much. And we'll get emails or whatever, be like, oh, we love the episodes when it's just like you guys, like, we want to know about you guys, but we don't sprinkle those in as much. And I think after talking with you at TravelCon, we were like, all right, that needs to be more of a priority to do that, because there is something about people want to know you and like your audience. I mean, obviously your audience is following you for you, right?
Yeah, of course. And you can like make that as niche as you want. It could be one travel story, and that could be 5-10 minutes. You could maybe riff off that and share like a funny experience with that story, whatever. I think storytelling is probably the biggest thing, and I think maybe people love that sort of stuff. But you can also tell your own stories, right? Not just the guest stories. So yeah, I highly recommend anyone who's listening that it takes a bit of guts to get a microphone and speak into it on yourself. Like, you've got to be fairly comfortable with that, and you're kind of speaking into the abyss. But you do learn over time that you can refine it quite well, and you can edit it quite well. So that obviously depends what type of episode you want. Do you want it completely raw, or do you want it like really edited and robotic? So I think somewhere in the middle is better. But yeah, I would highly recommend that.
I like a little bit of the both, the raw and the edited.
Yeah. We like to keep the ums in.
The ums, the so's, all the little filler words. The words we're way too guilty of using. All right, let's talk about travel again. So I would just love to hear how your travels have influenced your podcasting, or how there's so many angles we could go at here, but I want to hear about your travels. So you say you've been to like 70 odd countries. How have you grown as a traveler, and how does that reflect in your podcast? Is that a really broad question?
I mean, it's broad, but
go with that however you want.
If anybody can answer it, James can answer it.
That was a really poorly asked question, but I want to hear about, like, because I feel like we've talked a little about your podcasting, and your podcast is great, and I want people to hear that, but I also want to hear a little bit about your stories of traveling, because I think that'll hook them to go check out your podcast even more. So share with us just whatever you want to about your travels.
Okay, travels is divided into 3 sections, I think, for me. So the first 2-3 years were very hedonistic, funny stories, mainly traveling with someone, or solo actually, and a bit more riskier in terms of stuff I was doing. So there's episodes on the podcast that I've got my friends on to talk about who I traveled with at that time, and that is stuff like, riding down Death Road in Bolivia, and my friend nearly biking off the edge, like that sort of story that he comes on to talk about, or like in Laos when my friend told a local to turn the music down because he's trying to get some sleep, and he didn't take too kindly to that, so was threatening him with violence and stuff like this. We had to hide in a hostel. This sort of like stuff where it wasn't like on purposely happening. It just seems to be happening. I was held at the border in Thailand and Laos because I didn't have the right stamp to get into Thailand and out of Laos, right? These sort of ideas where I was just I was a raw traveller. Like I really didn't know too much about the world. I was so insular in Norwich that when I left to go to Bangkok, essentially, and you're in that first week, you're like, oh wow, like what is next? Because it's not like now where if I travel, I can probably go on my phone and think, oh, we'll go there next, and there's a nice cafe there, and there's an experience you can do. Whereas back in those days, it was like speaking to travellers, like what is that way, and what can we do that way? So an example would be after Bangkok, we stayed there for 7 days. We should have stayed there for 3, but we loved it that much. And we spoke to some people in the hostel. We met like 20 people that week, and we said, oh, where should we go next? And like, oh, just get a bus to the border in Cambodia and go through the fake border, then don't get scammed, and then get through the right border and go to Siem Reap. Okay, and sure, what happens is you get a coach, they drop you off early. There's a fake border there. You need to ignore everyone, go through it. It looks like the real border. So it's a strange vibe. And I didn't have a camera at the time. This is another thing. I didn't have a camera back in those days. So I was walking through, and then some guy said, oh, look, I'll get you through the real border with a taxi. We're like, oh, is this a scam? We're like, oh, let's go for it. So he took us to the border agency. We got our stamp in. And yeah, he got us a taxi to the other side. So it was like a real win. And we shared a taxi to Siem Reap. But there's so many stories like this you meet from travellers in that circuit, right? So that's the first sort of idea of those sort of travels. And then you go into maybe midway through the decade where I meet Emma, and then we kind of are still young enough to get the work visas. So we went to New Zealand, and we're still house sharing, so like meeting people, road tripping around New Zealand, going to Asia. I repeated my trip from 2013 with Emma. Very different trip. I'm not going in these like crazy stories of like, I don't know, trying to get through fake borders. We kind of had phones at that point. We researched it properly, and it was a much nicer trip because you're a bit more mature at that point. So then fast forward to last year, and the travels are still me and Emma, but we've kind of got a bit burnt out from the whole working thing, COVID thing, right? So that was, do you know what, let's quit. Let's go for a year. And we learned a lot of lessons last year, like in terms of how we travel, what I think travel should be for ourselves, and any trip in the future, what it should more look like than what it was. And we didn't know this like 18 months ago, right? So we learned some lessons. And then I think that influences the podcast, because maybe the first year of the podcast is the first part of that travels. Funny stories, like crazy things. And then the second half, the middle part of the podcast is guests coming on to talk about travel in a more of a correct way in terms of, you know, ethics and the way you should do things, and maybe like how travel is perceived worldwide and over tourism, stuff like that. And then the last third of the podcast, what we're in now, is a mix on experiences from our recent travels to guests like, I'm sure you guys will come on the podcast too, like talking to you, what have you experienced? And people like similar age. We're not 22 anymore, we're like mid-30s, right? So it's a different vibe. So that's kind of the journey of the travels and the podcast, I think, in alignment with each other.
Do you, like, when you tell those stories, like, oh yeah, I had to go over a fake border in Cambodia, do you feel like people look at you and they're like, what? Who are you? Yeah, who are you? Like, what are you talking about?
I think yes, but I think if you've experienced that, if you travel to people who've been to Cambodia overland from Thailand the last 10 years, they'll tell the same story. And the problem I haven't got is I didn't have a camera when I was traveling. Can you believe that? No camera, no phone.
Crazy.
This is the 2013, right? So I've got no proof, if you like. But my friend did have a camera, so he's got some photos. But it's just the way it was done. Like even going over to Vietnam from Cambodia, I think it still happens now. You put money in the passport just to get your passport processed first, right? Those sort of things. And it takes hours, right? And you're waiting for them to do it. So yeah, those stories are funny, but they're funnier with someone to talk to about them, right? And especially if you have that shared experience.
Yeah.
I have to ask, was the scam on Cambodia or Thailand? Was it Cambodia Cambodian
Thailand,
people?
Thailand's legit. No. Thailand's legit. No. They're fairly normal.
Okay.
It's that in-between period when you leave Thailand, so you got your exit stamp, and you're walking over to Cambodia to their border. It's that middle no man's land that each land border has, right? It's in there. Yep. Same as Vietnam. And then we land bordered all across Southeast Asia, right? So we got into that all the time. But the place where I got held at, so by those 4 army guys, that was going from Vietnam. From Laos. So I tried to leave Laos, and this was not like anything dodgy. I just obviously forgot to get an entry stamp when going to Laos from Thailand. I don't know how I missed it. I still can't recall it. But when I got to Laos, they said, no, your stamp is not there. But I kind of just ignored him. I thought, I don't know what you're talking about. So I just like essentially ran off and went to the river, crossed by boat to Thailand with all my friends. This is how naive you are. I think, I'll be fine. It's not going to be fine. Like the guy at the border of Thailand's like, where's your exit stamp for Laos? Do I need one? Yeah, you need one. You can't come in. I was like, no, can't come in. Go back. Just dismissed me instantly. So I had to go back across the water of the river by a boat, and those guys were waiting for me. They picked me out and took me to the office. Yeah.
Oh,
so
no.
Had to
How
negotiate.
scary.
Yeah. So there you go.
Oh, that's so scary. I live in fear I'm going to make one of those mistakes, but so far so good.
Well, I mean,
but those make the good stories.
They do make the good stories. And like sometimes you just do like stupid things on accident. I mean, we did something stupid going into Canada one time, and like that was it was really stupid.
Vancouver, actually.
Yeah, we were going to Vancouver, and we got into the Nexus lane thinking that our global entry would get us into Canada.
It does not.
It does not. Global entry gets us back into the States, and so
we did not have the right thing. So they waved us over real fast, and we were in line with everybody who had something questionable happening, and it was they looked at us like, you idiots. They let us through so fast, though. They had 0 questions for us, like, just don't do it again.
It's like, all right, so we made.
I've never been so scared of Canadians, so
no, we made the Americans proud that day. So.
But honestly, it is a scary situation, right? You don't know what's going to happen. And when I got back to the border, some guy, my friend, stuffed me a load of US dollars in my pocket, said, you might need this. I'm like, will I? But when I got there, I sat there for half an hour trying to convince them to let me go, but they wouldn't let me go. And the deal was, you pay us some money, we put the exit stamp in your passport, and you can go. And they placed my passport next to the stamp. I'm like, can't you just put the stamp in the passport and I can go? Yeah, but it's going to cost you $70. I'm like, 70? And then they said 70. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Wow. But then they said, you can pay in Thai baht. So I went, So I sat there for 5 minutes working out the maths in my head about the conversion rate. And I realised Thai baht was $62. So I was like, I'll do Thai baht. So I saved myself $8.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's a move of a season travel right there.
See, in those situations, I just start crying, and then eventually they just let me go.
He always jokes about that, and I've never actually seen you do that.
Yeah. Just sob uncontrollably, and finally they're just like, I'm done with this guy. Like,
don't go macho. No macho. Yeah. Just go in like really like upset. Damn.
Pass you off trick there. You are making me want to go back to Asia so badly, though. That's what I would return tomorrow if I could.
Yeah, love it.
Oh gosh, love it.
So I mean, you've been to all these places, like how do you keep travel new? How do you make it to where where you still enjoy it?
Yeah, keeping travel new is again another question I asked the other day on my episode, and I said, are we still chasing that first time in Bangkok? That's a good question. I don't think I'm chasing that exclusively, but I think a little bit of it is there, I think. So for me, when I reflect on my trip last year, I know Middle East was a bit of a new area, and that was a couple of crazy stories in that, especially with Lebanon, given what's going on now. Not surprised. But I think for me this year, I'm like, what haven't I done for a while? We didn't do those like land border things that I just mentioned in Thailand, right? So I'm like, I'm going to drop into El Salvador and just overland it to Mexico City. Let's see what turns up. Let's see if we can meet some locals. Maybe we can get some on the podcast. Let's see if I can create some cool YouTube content and just kind of do that, which I've not really done for years, it feels like, right? So that's the new fresh travels this year. Emma's not coming, unfortunately, so I'm doing it solo. So let's see what happens, yeah. And I'm interested in El Salvador because they've just recently cleared up their, well, I don't want to tempt fate here. They kind of cleared up their act in terms of the violence, right? So you can now go. Yeah. I think New York Times have named it in the top 50 places to go this year. So I think it's one of those countries where it's not as scary as people think it is. But I want to go there before all the people start going there. So that's the reason for the trip this year.
Yeah. So you said you're going to go from El Salvador, overlanded up to Mexico City? Is that what you said?
But my flight to San Salvador and then cross through Guatemala into Mexico, and probably just go to Oaxaca and Mexico City. But yeah, all overland, no flights.
Yeah.
I'm so upset we're going to miss you by just a couple months. I mean, we're doing the opposite direction right now, so
I
we
know.
could cross paths.
Damn.
Gosh, you're going to have a blast. The food, if you like Mexican food, it's great down there. Yeah.
Have you been to Mexico or Guatemala? I know El Salvador's
Never been to Central America. Never been.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh man, you're going to love it.
You'll love it. It'll definitely, like, anything goes, but nothing goes at the same time. Like, it's an interesting mix of, like, you can, it's just fun. And the people down there are just beautiful and nice and so hospitable, and just like, they'll do anything for you.
And you
Any
know
tips?
this because,
in terms
try
of just
all
that
the
sort of
food.
Latin culture.
Culture. Oh gosh.
Just to learn a little, like, Spanish goes a long way. Just to,
Okay.
you know, I mean, I feel like that's true of any country.
They're people in Latin America are just known for being so incredibly kind and gracious. I mean, they really are. Like, they are so forgiving of us and our poor Spanish, and they still work with us and try to, like, understand, and we try our hardest. Like, I don't think that culturally it's like a intimidating place to go because people are just so gracious.
No, but like when you go to El Salvador, and I've told Sarah that I've been to El Salvador twice, and
Oh, wow.
all I remember, not all I remember.
You were
but
young.
I was young, but I loved the pupusas. And so if you go
I've
there,
heard
get
about the pupusas.
get the pupusas. They're so amazing. And so just cheese, tortilla, like, I mean, whatever. I mean, that's all you need. But yeah, the landscapes down there as well, because I mean, here in America, people think Mexico and they think desert for the most part, or beaches like Cancun, but there is a mixture of, like, there's so much more in Central America, and it's definitely a little like the landscapes are just beautiful. They're you know, you can go on top of a volcano and swim in a lake, or just have amazing street food, and just it's it really is. I think you can get lost there very quickly, you know, like you could go have a great adventure and not be too much in harm's way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously play it's common sense. I mean, you've traveled enough to know, like, how to travel safely, but I mean, I wouldn't just tell anybody, just go have fun. You'll be fine.
Just go have fun.
I mean,
See you in a
Andy
month.
Lamborn.
See you in a month.
Hopefully. No. You mentioned Oaxaca too, didn't you? Didn't you say that was on your list?
Yeah, so I had El Salvador and Guatemala as like the real backpacking part of the trip, where I'm just going to go to like volcanoes, mine ruins, beach towns, some cities, those colonial type cities, right? And just kind of experience the coffee, the culture, the food, all that sort of stuff, and try and navigate my way over the border. But Mexico was more for me, I want to test, like, can I do like a co-working space for a week? So I'm thinking, well, I'll split Mexico up into two places. I'm not going too mental here. So Oaxaca and Mexico City, because I can fly direct to Vancouver from Mexico City. So I'm thinking, well, I'll spend 4 or 5 days in each and just kind of get back to civilization, do some podcasts and YouTube work, but also seeing the place and kind of mix it up. Not too fast. That's the idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Oh, so fun. We're about to head to Oaxaca. That's like,
Oaxaca's
really?
once we get back to Mexico, it'll be like probably a weekend, because our truck's in Mexico City. So we're excited to go there. Like, we've heard it is like the cultural epicenter of Mexico, like especially for food and mezcal. They say it's just like,
I feel like people, even the Mexicans, have been like, you've got to go to Oaxaca. And so all these people have built it up in my mind. And so I'm worried that I'm going to get disappointed really fast. So we'll let you know.
Like, we're talking like Oaxaca City. Like, people also talk about like coastal Oaxaca, which I forget. Like, that's such a varied state in Mexico. So I don't know where you're going, but we want to see as much as possible.
Yeah.
And you're going to be in like coffee region of Central America, and you're a coffee person too, right?
I am. Yeah, it's big part of my content. Yeah. So
you're going to be in
try and do
paradise.
some tours and try some coffee, right? Got to.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There's a.
If we find anything, we'll pass on the Rex to you. But
Oh yeah. There. Yeah. Oh, I already have. I have some places I can send it to you. So.
Sure.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. It'll be that'll be an amazing trip.
But that's fresh because it's a new area, right? So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
It's a new area, and it kind of only really leaves the continent of Africa as the big hole in my travels. So.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Have you been to
all these
Africa at
countries
all?
outside Africa? Yeah. So.
Wow. Okay.
So that's the next like what I would say is somewhere completely fresh and new. And it's good to have that, because I'm fearful that once I drop into certain parts of Africa's huge, like if you do the northern part and do like, which is almost like Middle East, right, got that same sort of culture, but then you go to the south and the middle part, once you kind of tick some of those countries off there, or you experience some sort of culture there, I don't know how much too different there's going to be anywhere else. So that's what I fear a little bit. Maybe Antarctica is like completely out there, but other than that, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not saying every place is the same, but
I know what you mean.
That different type of hit of completely
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we understand that completely. Like, it's even hard for us, even in the States, because people will ask us, like, "Oh, what should you do in Oregon, or what should you do in, Vermont?" And I'm like, you could do, like, they're two drastically different places, but sometimes it could feel like there's not much different in the culture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so that's always been a hard balance of us, of like trying to keep it fresh and new, because no matter what place you go to, it is a different culture. It may be slightly different, or it's just trying to like find it, right? You know, because this is hard.
And now in the age of social media, it feels like you experience things before you even get there. So I try really hard to like research the logistics, but don't ruin the surprise kind of thing. I don't know. Social media, I feel like, has made it really hard to experience culture shock in some ways, because I feel like you just get
I agree.
So much information ahead of time.
Yeah.
I don't really ask for recommendations. It's my rule.
Oh, then I won't give you any. We'll let you just figure out what hawk on your own then.
He was going to ignore my text message is really what it was going to be.
you're going to have to play solo on that.
El Salvador's different, because I'm like, I literally have no idea. But most countries don't ask. I just want to go and find out for myself on the ground. But you're right. You can literally find out everything you need to know before you go. I could put a post up today saying, tell me the 3 places I should go, the coffee places I should try out, the accommodations. And I'm like, that's kind of already set already. But I don't really want that. But El Salvador's different, because I'm like, there's not many hostels in San Salvador where I'm going to land. So I'm like, anyone got any ideas where I could stay that's decent? So that's kind of what I would ask for. But
Yeah.
It's a good tip.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you the first thing about El Salvador, and we're supposed to be there soon. It was just exciting to me. Like, it is. Like, that's such a rare feeling anymore. But I guess it's also kind of intimidating, especially since we're gonna have our whole home with us too.
Yeah. Hey, as long as we're close to pupusas, I won't complain.
Nothing can go wrong.
That's a good recommendation.
Pupusas. Oh gosh.
So. All right, just to like round the corner, and like, I feel like we could talk to you forever, but with this whole podcast that you're doing, and with the whole Travel Nation, everything, if somebody were listening today, what is there one piece of advice that you would give them about starting their travel podcast, or any podcast in general? Like, what would it be?
Yeah, 2 comes to mind. I think for a travel podcast specifically, get some travels in. Unless you're exclusively talking to guests and you're kind of learning off them, I would advise going to travel places yourself to get at least some sort of idea of what they're talking about. I think that's key, because we can talk and converse about certain parts of travel that are very easy for us to understand. But if you're completely new to travel, but you're going to set a travel podcast up, bloody hell, you need to either learn quickly or try and do some travels. I don't know how you can navigate that. It's different if you set a podcast up about Jimi Hendrix, who I love, right, which I thought about. Well, I can research Jimi Hendrix till the cows come home. I can do research on every song, every guitar he played. It's more finite, right? You don't need to live that experience because it's fact. But travels, wouldn't you want to travel yourself first to kind of at least understand certain aspects and certain countries? So I think that's key. And if you're looking to actually just set podcast up, just get organised. If you're doing guests or episodes where it's going to be long format, for example, I record heavily in advance, maybe 4 to 6, and I would get comfortable with being edgy in terms of no guests are coming on the podcast next week because no one's reached out to me. So you've got to think on your feet, be in advance of your episodes, try and get ahead of the game a little bit, and then ride out the first year where it's not going to go. The first 2 months are great, I think, because all your friends listen. And then you realise that honeymoon period sort of finishes because they sort of don't forget, but they kind of move on. And then you're into that weird, awful area where you're trying to attract people who don't know you. And that can take years, and I'm still nowhere near like the figures of like podcasts that people may think of now in terms of like the successful ones, right? So it's a journey. So you've got to be patient and then keep with it and enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, I'm not sure you can last that long.
Agreed.
That's a really, really good advice.
I think I've got one question too. Like we talked about, Chris really loves leaning into like the content creator side of things. So he always asks about like the pod tech, like starting a channel, starting a podcast, stuff like that. But what about somebody who just wants to start traveling? I mean, you've traveled in a lot of different ways. And I always love hearing people's different pieces of advice for starting to travel because it's intimidating.
Yeah.
But what would you tell someone who maybe has never traveled internationally?
God, that's a great question. I guess the most of your listeners or watchers are US based, right? Same as mine.
Mostly U.S.
No, mostly U.S.
Mostly countries who speak English for good reason.
Yeah, U.S., Canada, and then we do have some Brazilians out there.
Brazilians. Great place to start. Yeah. But if you're... The thing about America is, if you're American listening, which is different to where I'm from, if you're based in Vermont and you're like, I just want to try somewhere completely different, but maybe a bit nervous or international, we'll just go down to like Texas or New Mexico, go near the Mexican border. Because it's going to be completely different in terms of culture from there to Vermont, right? So I imagine that's a nice taste of travel in terms of the different culture aspect, but also it's within the same country. So if you get really scared or really stuck, you can just find a familiar voice or familiar, I don't know, something else that's familiar like McDonald's, I don't know, whatever, where you think, this is a bit more homey now. Yeah. Whereas like you could be speaking Spanish down in America, right? Where like they only speak Spanish and they have like tacos and Tex-Mex, the different culture stuff in the same country. Whereas from UK, you go from Norwich to Liverpool, it's different, but it's not the same in it. So there isn't that aspect. But I guess UK, if you're listening and you're in England and you want to go somewhere different, go to Scotland. Just go to somewhere that's fairly close but completely different in terms of the way it looks, and try that first before going out to an international country. And then going to an international country, if you're American or whatever, go to Ireland. It's a great way to dip into somewhere different, fairly same culture-wise, but at least it's a new country. There'll be some things that are different. And then just work your way in if you're not sure, right? So just the next thing might be France. So just over the water, different language, same in terms of the culture sort of, but like there are still more differences. And just work your way towards that out there country that you got in your mind, which could be like Bangkok, Thailand for me, or something like that. If you're completely ballsy, just book a ticket somewhere completely left field and just go and try it. What's the worst that can happen? You can fly home next day if you don't like it.
That's right, yeah.
Just take a credit card.
What's the worst that can happen?
What's the worst that could happen? You could be stuck in between the border of Thailand and Cambodia, right? Like,
things could happen.
Not a great example, but I know what you're saying.
The first half of your advice was really good.
If you're in that situation, good luck. You
didn't hear it from us.
They'll be in jail and they'll be like, remember when James said, what's the worst that could happen? Like,
That is really good advice, though, about starting. And we take it for granted, being American, that America, you don't even need a passport to go experience somewhere completely different geographically or even culturally. It is such a massive country.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And we do take it for
granted.
Yeah,
I mean, especially like British people, we've heard people say like they don't understand why Americans don't travel internationally until they come here. And they're like, now I understand why you guys don't have passports. Like, you can spend a lifetime. Yeah. We do get spoiled with that. But
I remember meeting this European family. I forget where they were from, but we met them in Florida. They were like, we flew into New York City. We drove to Florida, which is already like a crazy drive to begin with from New York City. And then they're like, and then next week we're going to California and we're driving there. It can't be that far. And I'm like, did you even look at a map? Like,
it stresses me out.
It's just like, I can't imagine. Their 2-week vacation turned into, just a 15-day trip or a driving trip. But
I think someone told me the same story. Like someone flew into, I can't remember who this was. It's probably a guest on the podcast about Europeans. They're like, they're flying to Toronto. And like, we really fancy seeing like Orlando. Oh yeah, well, that's not just over the border. You got to book a flight 5 hours down, and like they don't get the concept of the distance, right?
It's just massive.
But it is massive. Hard to understand because Europe is almost the size as the US, right? So it's quite hard to convey in terms of like I could fly half an hour from Norwich and I'm in Amsterdam. Like it's a real. And I've never been to Amsterdam, can you believe? So I've never done that, but like that is the option available, right? So that is crazy when you think about it.
That's hard for me to wrap my mind around. It's like so many different cultures within an hour flight. Like
Yeah.
Europe, just I
Yeah.
can't. It's just so hard for me to grasp. Like just a train ride, just hop on a train, and you could be in Italy and then France, and then I don't know. It's so charming sounding to me. Anyway,
That was the best part of our trip last year. One of them, anyway, was the train
Was
travel
it?
for a month in Europe. Yeah, interrailing. Yeah,
was that
'cause
fun? Did you enjoy it?
So fun, like because you're in EU, no border control,
Right.
and then you just book trains that work and are on time, and you can go from Paris to Luxembourg, down to Switzerland, through to Italy, across to Slovenia. Like we're doing these type of journeys, right? Incredible. Yeah.
You're giving me the travel bug again.
I know. We need to go to
Thankfully,
Europe.
we're in the right industry where we can.
I
But
know,
yeah,
yeah.
no, Europe I think is.
We just need to make an excuse to go there. We're like, oh, YouTube needs a video series about Europe.
Yeah, they do. They,
But
people want it.
road
Get the
tripping is
people
great
what they
though,
want.
isn't it? Road tripping is
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
best.
it is.
Yeah. I
We
think it's
love
the
it,
best.
and it really is like the overlanding things. Is you get to see places that nobody else is.
Yeah.
I've never heard of. Like these small towns are just so charming.
Yeah.
And we absolutely love the back roads of the
we
world.
would, I mean, on full transparency, we would have probably never visited Guanajuato, Mexico. Like, I mean, it's just never been.
It's not on the way to anything.
Yeah, it's just not on the way to anything. It's not something that was on our list or anything. But then we ended up there, and it is one of the prettiest cities we've been to
So beautiful,
in a
yeah.
long time, and it's just amazing to be able to go into these places that we would have to fly in and then drive 10 hours or something from the airport,
Yeah.
right, to get to.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing that we're able to do this. So,
Yeah, we love those little surprises.
yeah. So, James, if people are listening and they're like, hey, I really like that guy's accent, I want to hear more of his
We're
voice.
really hung up on the British accent.
Where can people find all of your content?
Okay, for the podcast, that is Winging It Travel Podcast, and that is available on Spotify, Apple, all the other providers. And there's a website, wingingittravelpodcast.com, and that has everything on there you need to know. And if you want the YouTube side, which is Roaming with Hamo, that's on YouTube as that handle. And that is more, there's no podcast in there, so that's purely video based. And I'm actually doing post-travels videos at the minute, so it's like a weird vibe of sort of reliving my trip from last year, but then creating a script about what we saw in line with my notes and my diary. So it's like a 3-thing pronged attack going on. So that's kind of cool. It's kind of post-travels, but I'm nearly at the end of my travels, right? So I think by the time I get to October, I'll be done with my year trip last year. So I'm almost at the end of that. So that's kind of where you can find me for videos. And then social media is probably only really Instagram, Winging the Travel Podcast. I do occasionally dip on Facebook, but not too much.
Perfect. We'll link everything so people can find you.
Sure.
But yeah, it was so good to talk to you again. This was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah,
Thanks
it's
for
been great
coming
to
on
catch
to the
up.
show.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to What No One Tells You with Chris and Sarah. If you have a comment or question that you want answered on the air, be sure to send us a message to hello@chrisandsarah.com, or you can call or text our phone number at 423-825-9572. Thanks for listening.